Thank you, Alice, for that kind introduction. I would like to thank Selma Jeanne for her vision and the Fulbright Association and Fulbright for this acknowledgement. I would also like to welcome Staff Sergeant Ashley from the Defense Media Activity within the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. My 2017 Fulbright at the Trinity Laban Conservatoire in London changed my art and my life. I went to London to investigate the military experience through choreography, to see what other veteran service organizations were doing with veterans in the performing arts, and solidify and transform my choreographic practice. During my 2 years in London, I collaborated on over 20 major projects in 5 countries and worked with veterans and civilians through the support and partnership of Fulbright, the US-UK Fulbright Commission, the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance, the Soldiers Arts Academy, the US Embassy in London, Exit 12 Dance Company, King's College London, the Maltings Arts Centre, and the UK Invictus Games. I hope that my research, results, and reach serves as my thank you to you all. It was January 2000. The place, Parris Island, South Carolina, United States Marine Corps Recruit Depot. The day was Family Day, or the day where, right before graduation to become a United States Marine, your family got to come on base and see all the crazy stuff you did to become a Marine. On that day, one of the people that came to cheer me on in my graduation was my girlfriend. With her, she brought a yellow manila envelope full of photos. I took those photos, marched straight up to my senior drill instructor, snapped to attention and said, "Senior drill instructor, this Marine would like to speak to you, sir." He was a short man, and he was wearing one of those smoky covers pulled way down over his eyes, and he had braces, so every time he talked, he spit. He looked down at me and sneered, "What?" "This Marine would like to show you something, sir." And I handed him the yellow envelope full of photos. He pulled out the largest one. It was an 8x10 black and white photo of me in tights and a tunic, partnering a beautiful ballerina in a tutu. It was a photo shoot we had done for Sleeping Beauty. He took one look at that photo, started to shake his head and said, "Oh, Baca, I knew there was something weird about you." My unit was sent to Fallujah, Iraq in 2005, where I first heard the name of this conference, Hearts and Minds. Back then, we were trained to be violent and aggressive in our patrols so that no one would want to mess with us. Then, the forces in Iraq realized that posture was not helping them in their mission. So they started a campaign called Winning Hearts and Minds to engender us to the locals so we could help them, so they would feel they could trust us and tell us if there were anything going wrong in the area. I like to say that we did a lot of good in the area. We handed out food and water when we could, and even created a neighborhood watch type program where those locals could tell us if there were bad guys in the area. I got back from war in 2007, and things were great, or at least I thought they were. Those close to me told me that because of the war, I had brought back a lot of anger and violence, and that I was often depressed and anxious. The one closest to me, my girlfriend, sat me down, and I thought it was going to be one of those conversations where she said, this isn't working, and leave. But instead, she said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? I told her I would start a dance company. So in 2007, we started Exit 12 Dance Company and started talking about the impact of war on the warrior. We were creating these pieces of choreography and taking them to New York. My buddy, my roommate in Fallujah, came and did some of the performance as well as a Marine. We would take our gear into these dressing rooms where beautiful dancers were getting into tutus, leotards, and we were putting on our combat gear. One of those performances came out of a collaboration. One of my buddies, a Marine named William Michael Day, was having similar problems coming home. His unit was in the surge in 2003. They saw some of the heaviest fighting in Al-Naziriyah and Al-Qut. And when he came back, his world was as in shambles as much as mine, if not more. Michael turned to poetry to help him process the experience he had just been through. Together with a musician, we turned that poetry into choreography.
My dilemma. I have grown weary of your thoughts, these stories, these anecdotes, these euphemisms, and hypothetical scenarios. Let me entertain them alone. Allow me to briefly detach myself from this environment. I want to own this space, so give me a moment to move with my burdens in solitude. They can only be carried by me. They tell me I belong to the collective. My unit, my brothers, my sisters, my Marine Corps. They tell me I cannot be separated from this bond that we share, but in this space, even if only for a brief period of time, this moment belongs to me. If you want me to be a part of this, then let me stand briefly apart. This war belongs to all of us, but this gear on my back and shoulders causes me pain that only my muscles know. My brothers and sisters suffer similar pain, but empathy has its boundaries. The psychological and physiological tolls that I must endure belong to me. Long when this war has ended and my pack is stored in a garage with other memories, I will sit in the room with my thoughts and my pain. You will not be there to catch the tears falling from my cheeks. Somewhere closer distant, tears will fall from one of your cheeks and I will be gone. When I return home, I will walk blocks unknown and known alike on my own. When I sit on my porch, looking at the horizon and attempting to understand my place without war, you will be a world away. When I hold my lover's hand as she searches for explanations why I can no longer be the person that left her, you will be battling your own numbness. For you see, bullets have a powerful way of bringing us together, but the greater power lies in a bullet's ability to pull us apart. I move forward in this space, consumed. I hope you understand. I'm afraid I'm going to die alone. Who is going to want to be with me inside of my messed up head and dealing with the horrible things that I think about myself and the world? I can't stop crying and I don't know what will make it better. I'm really scared that I'm going to die alone. I don't want money. I don't want fame. I don't want a nice car or a house. I just don't want to die alone. I can't even type right now. I'm crying so hard, and I thought, oh well, just let it flow and see what comes of it. I'm not so sure this was such a good idea. It hurts so bad, snot dripping from my face and my eyes flooded with tears. And I don't care, and I'm just drooling and crying and wondering if it will end, and if it does end, who will it end with? They say write about what you know, and I don't feel like I know anything anymore. So how can I write? I'm scared I will die alone in this dumb apartment in a place where no one ever comes, and I feel like I don't have much left in me, like there is nothing left inside. I feel dead already and numb, and who would want me like this, and who would like me like this, and who would need me like this? And I want to wake up, and everything is fine, but everything is not fine, and I can't sleep because of bills, and I have to work because of bills. So I will get up and just go to work and pretend it is okay, but it's not okay, and I need help, and I want to check in somewhere that can help me, but the bills, where will I live? I have a lease. I hate the way we live. I hate the way I live. I can't figure anything out. Why is everything so foreign to me? I know what's going on, but I have no clue, and this is a horrible feeling to have deep inside of you that only comes out when someone provokes you, or you've had one too many, or you see the same look of pain in a friend's eyes and know exactly what they are going through. But you can't do a goddamn thing because you can't even help yourself, and when the hugs don't work anymore, what is left? What is left? What is left?
We were doing work like this for years. And then I got a job as an artistic director for a ballet company on the East Coast and started creating normal performances, doing works like Don Quixote, new works, and a military-themed Nutcracker that we performed in Connecticut. I almost stopped doing the military work and moved completely into this artistic role until a mentor sat me down and said, "What are you doing? You were walking an unconventional path, and now you're just going to be like everyone else." It caused me to pause and then reignited my desire to apply for a Fulbright. I applied for a Fulbright in 2016. I was awarded a Fulbright to London in 2017 to the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance. Two projects were in my application. I was going to create a brand new Rite of Spring to Igor Stravinsky's score based on the military experience, and I was going to investigate my choreographic practice and become a better choreographer. In looking at my 2 years at the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance, I was thinking about the impact of wars on our soldiers and on the people that are around them. I'm sure you've heard of things like the trauma of war, post-traumatic stress disorder, but have you heard of moral injury? Or when something someone is told to do violates their own personal morals and values, and yet they do it anyway. The Greeks investigated this and tried to respond to it after all of their wars. Writers like Sophocles and Homer wrote the Greek tragedies like Ajax and the Odyssey to present to audiences to do two things. One, specifically to help soldiers release the trauma from their experiences, but two, to present these works, which were extremely graphic, to civilians who might not have experienced it. In order to inform my practice, I looked at a lot of theories. Michel Foucault in the 17th century discovered, wasn't writing in the 17th century, he discovered in the 17th century, that you didn't have to train a warrior from birth, set them aside in their own part of society. He figured out that society had discovered that they could create warriors at any point in their life through discipline and training. That training has only gotten better. I also looked at theater makers like Anton Artaud and Bertolt Brecht, individuals who thought reality was important for people to see, that theater work should not just be these creations that were designed to entertain, that audiences should be challenged with things that were real. And then Bohl and his Theater of Democracy, where he presented problems to audiences and presented them one solution, and then solicited answers from the audience and had the audience present them on stage. Jerome Bell was instrumental in his investigation of the individual and the way he presented the unseen experiences of people like Véronique Dehouneau, a ballet dancer from the Royal Ballet. He created a piece for her where she got on stage and talked about her career and her regrets before she retired. And lastly, Stefan Wolfert, who is a current practitioner who is looking at ways to utilize Shakespeare to decruit or untrain military individuals by connecting their stories to stories from the Bard. These are a couple of research questions I looked at, but as you kind of peruse these, the important thing is I wanted to find a way choreographically to communicate these traumatic experiences, these profound experiences that soldiers had, to audiences in a way that provoked audiences to action. And in my own little way, hoping that a piece of that action is something that we have been talking about this whole conference: peace building. I'm going to let the first project I did at Trinity Laban speak for itself. It is an excerpt from the documentary Exit 12 Moved by War, which was created by Square Incorporated and Evenod Films. It won the best short doc at South by Southwest, among other film festivals, and recently got picked up by Fox Searchlight Pictures. And after I introduce you to that, this investigation over my research took a total of 4 projects. Everett's piece, which is part of the documentary, I continued to research and present The Rite of Spring, and then 2 projects I'll go into talking about Entrench and Entrenched 2.
A couple of years ago, I was at the end of my rope, wondering if this was the right choice, wondering if we could make it. And then 2 Marines close to me took their own lives. One of them was one of my platoon mates in Fallujah. After that, I decided that I wanted to do more than just performances. And that's when we started doing veteran workshops.
Yes, everybody, 3 and 4, breathing 5 and 6. Good, 2 and 1.
Military training is extremely powerful.
3, 1 and 4.
It affects not only the body, but the mind.
Head circle, head goes slow. 4.
In boot camp, you're taught these repetitive movements, and it's designed to train anyone, ultimately, how to kill. The problem with that is, after service, how do you make that part of the training disappear?
Take it all out.
I'm going to introduce 5 words to you. I want you to put gestures to those words. You go back to your military training and let them inspire what you do.
dance, we can transform our experiences and start to loosen that training, and we can hopefully move on.
I was sent to Vietnam in the spring of 1969. 245th Surveillance Airplane Company. One night, a rocket blew up very close to me, and we all got stuck. I was in a total panic. Never in my life had I imagined I would fail under fire. And it broke me. When I came home from war, I was having a very hard time. Lots of depression, lots of drugs, suicide attempts, and it went on for years. Writing and expressing myself has been what's kept me from returning to the darkest places. There's a liberating energy to it. It releases things inside of us. I still struggle with addiction and serious depressions. Nowadays, I spend my time with vets with problems, vets who are suffering. I want to reassure them that no matter what their situation, deep inside of them, there is a spirit of life that wants to keep moving forward. That is my purpose, because I believe life wants to live. It is as simple as that. Life wants to live.
After that project, Everett wrote me and said, "The impact on me has been profound and deep. Everett's piece. you honor a dishonorable soldier. This film has been seen by over, I know, at least 300,000 people on Vimeo. And like I was telling you, I wanted to create audience engagement, and so many people commented. One of the comments was, had 3 tours in Vietnam, 64 to 66, could have used Exit 12 workshops. So touched that this is happening. Anything we can do to help returning vets realize that they can relearn how to be part of society without hurting themselves or other people. Like Everett, it was clear that the impact of military training was powerful, yet invisible. These training exercises that you might be familiar with and what you might picture in your head might be similar to boot camp. A lot of physical training, learning how to use a weapon, learning close combat drills. But a Marine and a soldier train their whole career. One of those training exercises was an artillery drill before we went to Iraq. Artillery is basically a big gun that shoots a big bullet about this big and destroys everything within about 50 meters. Everything within about 100 meters is wounded. During this training exercise, I was assigned with a VIP, like the president of Croatia. And my direction was to protect them and transport them from, let's say, the street to Salon B. I met my VIP, I had my security detail, I'm moving them along, and suddenly one of the judges for this exercise drops something. And you hear that familiar whistle and a huge explosion. And in my head, the training kicked in. I grabbed the VIP, I ran towards a concrete barrier, I threw them down, and I covered them with my body. Now, you might be thinking that this exercise is designed so that my body would protect this VIP so nothing would happen to them during an artillery strike. You're wrong. The reason that you're supposed to put them in a comfortable place, close to something that is immovable, and cover them, is so that you're both easier to find if the artillery round falls close enough to destroy. It was things like this that people were like, I didn't know that. And I started creating stuff to tell them. I started working on a project called The Rite of Spring. I wanted to show the impact of military training and service through dance. And then one of the collaborators I was working with keyed me in on 2 things. One was an author that was paralleling the journeys of the writing of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring with the cultural reverberations that began World War I. The second thing was a training depot in the UK called Deep Cut. You might not know, but in the UK, young people can join the military at the age of 16. And Deep Cut was one of those training places where they sent the 16-year-olds to begin their military training. And in 2006, 2007, I might have those dates wrong, there were 4 unexplained deaths. Investigators chalked them up to suicide, but follow-on investigations have realized that wasn't the case. They've used words recently like bullying, hazing, retaliation. In the military, hazing is when one person is not going along and adapting to the military system, and so the other members of the unit use physical and sometimes verbal violence to get them to go with the program. We ended up putting this into a project we called The Rite of Spring. The similarities and associations with the rite are sacrifice, the sacrifice of one person to a system, ritual, military training is a ritualistic activity. And I forgot the other one because it's on my other slide. We performed this. This is our last performance that we did in Berwick-upon-Tweed, which is the easternmost city before you get to Scotland. We also took iterations of this work to King's College London's War Studies Department, where we presented it to academics. The best, I'm not going to say the best, we also had an opportunity to take it to TEDxTU Berlin in Germany. We didn't use live musicians like we did in this performance. Instead, we created a soundscape with the Rite of Spring and interviews from UK military veterans from World War II and German military veterans from World War II, and presented it to German students and university professors. The audience engagement from this was astounding. I like to categorize audience engagement in 3 levels. Our first level is when the audience sees one of our performances and they're like, I have a question, how long have you been dancing? How did the dancers prepare for this? How do they feel dealing with this material? Level 1. Level 2 is a bit more engaged. They're connecting with either someone that they know who served in the military, or one of these performances caused a memory to snap back of their grandfather, their uncle, and they started to ask more in-depth questions. This was one of those experiences where an academic said, this was an excellent forum for bringing together artists and academics, for developing a new kind of participatory knowledge, for understanding the long-term after effects of PTSD, and how dance, theater, and audience participation can ameliorate some of the legacies of trauma and conflict. But where does military training, memories of war, and the embodied experience of war lived within the body? Because my supervisor pushed me to take big risks, I turned my training internal and started investigating myself and my experiences in war. I did that with what I would call a really weird project. It was a durational performance project. The physical activity that we were exploring these memories with was digging. In the military, you use digging a lot. You dig fighting holes. That fighting hole can be used for protection, or usually you sleep in it at night. Digging is also used to fortify positions, and digging is also used disciplinarily. When Marines were not doing what they were told, we made them go out and fill sandbags for a day. We use digging to spark up memories and these embodied experiences. I spent 2 days, 12 hours a day, digging and refilling a hole in the lawn of the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance in London. They're fans of their lawn, but they let me dig it up. As I was digging, we live streamed it, and we also opened up the area to passersby. They could watch, they could engage on social media, ask questions, comments, and then there were windows of time where I would take a break from digging and I would respond to these comments. The physical activity drained me, caused new pains to show up in my body and old pains from the war. Because of this, the memories were flooding back. The embodied experiences were flooding back. It's in fast forward because I didn't want this to be like 8 minutes long because, 24 hours of digging is really boring. These memories were flooding back. And topics like mortality, futility, and fatalism were propping up. I discussed these in some of the question and answer periods about how I felt that I had died in Iraq because of war being so indiscriminate. That release of my own mortality kept me sane. Because my responses were so honest, unbridled, veterans started sending me private messages. One of my Army buddies, a wounded Army veteran from Fallujah, wrote and said, after watching the digging, then I kind of really started to affect me and thought about the actions of having to bury the dead, Then it clicked with the reading that we were talking about kids and having to bury the kids you had trained for war, and that your hole was about half the size of a grave, kind of like you would need with the young, mixed with the idea that there were so many dead, and thinking about the folks who just spent years constantly burying the dead, and the repetitive actions, and mixed in there, you could see and hear your pain and agony, and having that mixed with where I let it, if, take me, I was moved and speechless, felt pain, and happy to have been able to watch this. Phil's comment got me and gave me a direction to move forward for my final project. I reached out to Phil and to 3 other veterans to get their experiences in war, to paint a picture. And then I asked them a couple of questions. I asked them, can you talk about mortality? Can you talk about fatalism? And if there was something that you wanted to tell the world that you haven't been able to tell them about the war, what would it be? I asked them that they give us their responses in either video or audio format so we could give the dancers a more personal connection. I got 4 dancers who had qualities of leadership, improvisation, thinking on their feet. And I started creating a large choreographic project in the lawn of the Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance. It's a large lawn, grass-filled with a lot of hills, terraces, large flat spaces. So topographically, it was interesting. And we took the audience on 4 different journeys, 4 different dancers in 4 levels of difficulty. The levels of difficulty were determined by the topographic features. If there was a hill, it was a hard journey. If there was a flat space, it was an easy journey. We had the dancers build a score where they could tell these memories, relive these memories, both through movement and vocalization. Further, we mic'd up all of the dancers and put speakers throughout the lawn, creating this layered experience of sound, so that each group heard not only their leader, like Sarah here, but heard everything that was going on. They were talking about, either in the first person or third person, these experiences of war. One of the experiences that most of them landed on was an experience of another Army veteran who was in a helicopter attack in Fallujah. And when I asked him that experience that he would tell people, he said, when I was getting on the helicopter, there was a young woman in the Army getting on with me, struck up a conversation on the helicopter, and we're having a great chat. And the next thing I knew, I was stuck and couldn't move under piles and piles of steel, the helicopter. It was hit with a rocket and went down. He remembers being stuck under that pile and looked over and saw the woman. And he holds the guilt of not being able to save her life to this day. These were the stories that the dancers shared. Then they gathered upon the hole that I had buried. This time I lay down in it. The dancers started filling the hole with me in it, and then invited the audience to follow along. A review of this performance said, although the mood is somber, it wasn't tense or alienating. At one point, one audience member asked another to hold their sandwich so they could pick up the spade, showcasing that people felt united in the place, not inhibited by its mood. For me, I had this plan to do some movement or some vocalization, but as I lay there waiting for the first pile of dirt, I was petrified with fear. As the first shovelful of dirt fell on my leg, that fear increased, and I did everything I could to stay still, calm, and keep breathing. After the audience was done, they moved to another place in the lawn, and I wanted to vocalize something, but I wanted it to come naturally. My eyes were closed, and I remember that even though they were closed, I could still see the sky. So I started to say, I can see the sky. I can see the sky. I can see the sky. After the performance, the dancers gathered around me and took a bow. And suddenly, people were flooding to us and talking. They weren't asking questions anymore. They wanted to share their experiences. What was interesting about that is this piece turned a mirror around to each one of them and made them consider their place in global conflict. The review again says, for all its tale of loss and frustration, in Entrench, we are left with feelings of regeneration as we see that movement and collaboration can be intensely therapeutic, setting those who suffer the most back on track in the hope that they will become themselves again. These investigations and projects demonstrated the ability of choreographic events to create communication and healing as steps toward peace building. I created new choreographic events that addressed war trauma in a manner that allowed audiences to empathize with soldiers without displaying the explicit realities through performance. Through thoughtful and later experiences, we were led to empathy and community. In summary, I am honored to have participated in these investigations and projects and to have been a part of an effort to increase understanding of soldiers who have undergone the traumatic experience of war service. What began as an urgent search for personal healing has grown into an artistic journey for peace for many soldiers and civilians. That artistic journey has solidified my resolve that it is through empathy and understanding that we can create a peaceful world. But we, soldier and civilian, need to do it together. Thank you.